The Ir-Koel galaxy has fallen into darkness. Worlds that once shone with the light of civilizations are now just silent ash balls drifting among the stars. Hundreds of systems have been burned to the ground. The time of words and laws has passed. Only war remains. The cause of this catastrophe was the voice of darkness, an ancient intelligence that awoke at the center of the shattered Ir-Koel nebula. It had no form, knew no mercy, and offered no choice. It whispered into the minds of those who were weak, who desired power and vengeance, and transformed them into ashlings, empty vehicles for its will. In response, the last Concordia rose up, an alliance of surviving worlds led by the remnants of the old bloodlines that had gone underground after the fall of the Council of Light. At its head stood Kaiorn, a human who had inherited the spark, an artifact said to have belonged to the first maker. But Kaiorn did not know. The spark was only half the truth. The other half was hidden in the lost Tainar system, swallowed by the darkness 10 centuries ago. It is said that the stars' moans still resound there, echoes of the fallen gods who once guarded the order of the galaxy. At the same time, on the dead satellite of Varus, in a temple destroyed before the beginning of time, Selin, a warrior from a people that existed before the birth of matter, woke up. Her skin was woven from the light of black holes, and her blood was made from the ashes of extinct suns. She did not remember who awakened her, only a whisper. You are needed again. You are the key. You are the fall or the salvation. And now, in a distant future where even time has no power, the fates of three, Kaiorn, Selin, and the voice of darkness, will collide in the final battle for memory, a war that will eclipse everything that came before it. Because if memory dies, reality itself will die. Kaiorn stood in the ruins of the ancient Ir-Koel lighthouse when the sky flared. Fire that was not light. He knew it was not an explosion. It was the fall. Another world consumed. His maps no longer mattered. Space crumbled along with time. He clutched the spark, feeling it tremble in his hand like a living heart. She was afraid. The airwaves crackled dully. Kaiorn, we lost Traesem. The ashlings were already inside. The connection was cut off. At the last moment, he heard a child crying. 6 jumps away, Selin emerged from the Temple of Bones. Her movements were precise and predatory. She did not touch the ground. She floated above it as if she did not belong to gravity. A strange feeling grew inside her, a longing, alien and sharp. She did not understand why she was drawn to people, to their short, mortal pain. Their songs rang in her head like echoes of an old oath. She opened her palm and a symbol lit up in the air, a broken circle, the seal of the summoners. As Concordia gathered the remnants of its fleet to retake the Zen 9 frontier, the voice of darkness whispered louder and louder. It was invisible to the ears, living within the fabric of the mind. Admirals went mad. Generals burned their fleets to avoid being infected. Some ships changed course themselves, heading into the void where there were no stars. They never returned. Kaiorn knew. The spark was leading him to her. He didn't know her name. He didn't know if she was alive. Only a feeling, heavy as the core of a star. Every time he slept, he saw the same image, an eye with a galaxy spinning inside it, and at the center, a woman of light and dark. She looked not at him, but through him, as if searching for something long lost. Selin already knew his face, and she knew that she would kill him, or die next to him. Somewhere in the shadows of fallen stars, the voice was gathering new flesh. His ashlings were no longer just shells. He was learning. He was shaping them into thought, an army, a feeling. They were beginning to discern lies from truth. They were beginning to desire. And that meant he was almost done transforming. When the voice speaks with the word, reality will be torn apart. And there were only 3 cycles left until this moment. If you want, I'll continue. There will be a clash, the first meeting of Kaiorn and Selin, and the revelation of who the voice really was. Kaiorn's ship, the Wind Line, tore through the crumbling space of the Yadris system, gravitational waves tossing the hull like dry grass in a storm. The spark flickered, its light growing dim, like a dying heart in the chest of the world. The screens flashed the ruins of stations, metal and flesh twisted into spirals. Not a single signal, only the hum of the void. And then he felt it. Not a look, not a movement, a presence. As if someone had stood next to him in the empty hall and inhaled the air. A spark flared, squealed, and died down. Selen descended into the ruins of the ancient Judge Guardian. Once, the judgment of the corrupted souls who had fled the law of light had been held here. Now the temple was empty, but the memory was not. She walked through the corridors, not touching the floor. Images pulsed on the walls, her face, warped by pain. And next to him, Kaiorn, next to him, hand in hand, blood on his fingers. It was not the past, it was not the future, it was what had always been. Truth is timeless. And then the first cry was heard. It didn't come from the throat, it came from the space itself. It was stitched together from the memories of dead children, from vows broken at the last moment, from loves that were not allowed to come true. The ashlings burst from the void, and their eyes were not empty. They were full of sadness. They didn't want to kill, they just couldn't stop. The wind line fell from orbit, cutting through the atmosphere like a knife through cloth. Kaiorn was the first to emerge, ablaze. A spark burned in his chest, lighting his face from within. He saw her standing in the middle of the rift, among the ashlings who had not attacked. They looked at her as if she were a light, as if she were fear, as if she were a mother. Selen raised her hand. Kaiorn stopped. He wasn't breathing. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the air. You brought the spark, so it all starts here. He wanted to say her name, but he didn't know it. Only a feeling. I remember you. She nodded. Because we were one, before the word, before the fall. There was a hissing sound behind them as the fabric of reality cracked. A silhouette emerged from the crack, faceless, formless. But everything around it began to tremble, to die. The voice of darkness no longer whispered. It spoke. I found you. 2 fragments, 2 mistakes, 1 heart. Selen turned to face Kaiorn, and there was no fear in her gaze. If you trust me, we can die beautifully. And he said, only if you're the first. The wind rose, the spark exploded, the last wave began. Their sky collapsed. When the spark exploded, space didn't just shake. It ceased to exist. Sound disappeared. Colors disappeared. Only Kaiorn and Selen remained in something that was no longer time or matter. Their bodies were burned to the bone, but they stood, not by choice, but because they had to. The voice walked through the decay, and with each of its movements, the laws of existence crumbled. Gravity twisted like a snake. Light withdrew into itself. Words on the lips died before they were born. But not in them. The words still lived in them, not as sound, but as memory. Kaiorn stepped forward, the spark, no longer a thing but a flame woven from his own soul, engulfing his hands. He felt no pain. All he felt was her. Selen raised her palms. Behind her, the ashlings began to cry. Yes, they cried, not screamed, not growled. Tears flowed from their empty sockets because her light reminded them that they had once been alive. Someone had loved them. Someone had named them. The voice stopped, not because it couldn't walk, but because it didn't understand. Why do you not surrender? Thundered in their minds. You are nothing. Grains of sand in the blood of the universe. I am the call of the void. I was before the light, before form. I am the truth you fear. Kaiorn laughed, a real bitter laugh. You are the truth. Then why are you afraid of 2 shadows? Selen walked forward, each step burning the fabric of darkness beneath her feet. You were before the light, but we were before you. We are the song. And then they united, not with their bodies. There was almost no sense in them anymore. But the spark, and what was inside it, and what was inside it in her, merged into one. The word was born. The voice trembled. For the first time he felt, not just realized, felt fear, because in that word there was a name, the name he lost when he refused to be. The word flashed across space like a flash before the birth of stars. Everything shook. The ashlings screamed, but not from pain, but from liberation. Their bodies were scattered into ash, but their souls were finally rising. The voice roared. Its forms multiplied, changed, dissolved. It rushed at them. Selen closed her eyes. Kaiorn hugged her. And at the moment of collision, a miracle happened. They disappeared, and all the darkness disappeared along with them. The worlds that were destroyed remained destroyed. The bodies did not return, but something had changed. Memory. People began to remember the stars again. And in the black space, where there was nothing, for the first time in many centuries, a new light flared up. Not from the sun, from the name, what they left behind. So that if the darkness ever returns, someone will speak it again. And again became the word. They disappeared, but the memory remained. 100 years after the last wave, a young archivist named Eltar found a fragment in the wreckage of Drail 7, a translucent crystal, barely warm to the touch. He didn't know what it was. He didn't know whose flame flickered within. He simply touched it and saw. He stood among the black stars, and before him was a woman of light and darkness, with eyes that burned with infinity. Her voice was soundless, but it sounded in his bones. "You are not ready," and disappeared. After that, Eltar could no longer forget. Not a single thing, not a single word. He remembered other people's dreams, other people's pain, other people's love. He knew the language of the stars, although no one taught it to him. He began to write, texts that lit up from his hand. People read and cried, read, and remembered what they had never experienced. They called it the curse of light, but not all. Some understood. He is the bearer of memory, of the name, of the word. He began to search for a map, a fleet, allies. And one day, he found it. In a system where there were no stars, on the surface of a dead moon, lay a sarcophagus made of a metal that did not exist in this galaxy. And on it were engraved two symbols, welded into one, circle and fire. When he touched it, the sarcophagus opened, empty. Only a voice, familiar, alien, eternal. Everything will start again. But now you are the beginning. And she is waiting for you on the other side of words. And Eltar understood. The voice of darkness had not been destroyed. It had been rewritten. It had become part of the song. And the song always seeks a new singer. And in the depths of Tainar, where the star moans rest, the echo sounded again. It whispered, Selen didn't disappear. Kaiorn is not dead. They just became words. And now you have to say them. Eltar had not slept for 3 days. He could not. When he closed his eyes, the universe opened up, endlessly, without mercy. He saw the birth of times, the death of gods, heard the voice of a baby born in a sector long since consumed by the shadow. He knew his name, his future, his death. But amidst all this chaos, there was one thread, her, Selen. He could feel her breath as if she were standing over his shoulder. He could feel Kaiorn's pain, his laughter, his dying, I am not afraid. And he knew he was more than a witness, more than a carrier. He was a bridge. Gathering all he could, Eltar left the ruins of Drail 7. No one stopped him. No one wanted to follow him. He walked alone, but he felt millions of voices, as if the void was watching and waiting. His ship was old, a relic from the First Council. But when he first touched the control panel, the ship lit itself. A symbol flashed on the screen, a circle pierced by a spark. The path lay deep, into forbidden zones where there were no maps, where there was no life, where even the darkness retreated because it was afraid of what had come before it. He sought the star moans, the place where legend says the scars of the song live, where words are etched in stone, where one can, with the right name, bring back what has been forgotten. The journey was long. The ship died with each jump. Space was shrinking as if the universe itself did not want him to reach it. But Eltar walked. He was no longer afraid, because with each day the memory became denser, brighter. He already knew what he would find. At the end of the path, there was nothing, just a black star, motionless without light. But it called. Eltar went out into outer space, without a suit. There was air, there was gravity, and under his feet were stones, smooth, black, cracked. When he touched them, they spoke, not by voice, not by sound, in pure word. He heard Selim, born before form, molded from the shards of the first darkness. She was the first to whisper the star, not like light, and what a choice. The flames rose, the stones crumbled to dust, and in the middle of nowhere, an image appeared. Not an illusion, not a memory. It, alive, vulnerable, unarmed. Selin looked at him. "You came," she said. Eltar nodded. There was a lump in his throat. There were stars in his eyes. "Are you alive?" She smiled, sadly, softly. "No, but I'm not dead yet." He understood. Her soul is tied to the song. The word holds her like a nail holds a shadow. She waited for someone to remember, for someone to believe, and then she stepped towards him, touched his forehead. "Say my name." He didn't know where from, but he knew. Ir-Koel Selim. The world has cracked, and from that crack came another voice, enveloping, familiar. "You found her after all," said Kaiorn. "Now tell me mine." Eltar began to cry, because now he knew why he lived. He was born to give a new name to those who could not name themselves, and that means they will come back. When the word is spoken, he sat among the wreckage of eternity, alone with names pulsating around him. They came in dreams, in the shards of memory, in the echoes of voices that were no longer there. One after another, children's, forgotten, torn from flesh, erased in battle, sacrificed to save others. Eltar heard them all, and repeated them, whispered, sang. Each name was a blow to the heart, but he could not stop. They were his breath. He knew he was a singer now, not by title, by essence. Selin stood there, not quite real, not quite a shadow. She was not gone, but she was not alive. A piece of her remained in the world only because he knew her name. And Kaiorn, now a voice hidden in the blood of fire, spoke through the stars when Eltar looked up at the sky. The song wasn't beautiful, it was terrible. It contained millions of deaths, screams, loneliness, betrayal, hope, but it was real, alive, and therefore stronger than the voice of darkness. They thought they had won, that the Ashmen were gone, that it was all over. But Eltar knew, the darkness does not die, it waits. And now he felt it again. Not like before, not war, not horror, not hordes. The darkness returned as silence, like a world where no one called each other by their first names, where they didn't remember, they didn't sing, where they didn't believe in the pain of others. The darkness has learned to hide, and he realized the new war would not be a massacre. She will be oblivion. He left Tainar. He took the song with him, in his blood, in his voice, in his words. He found a ship made of crystal, alive, ancient, from an era when words were weapons and shields. The ship accepted him, knew him, called him by his true name. He who keeps the name. Selin no longer spoke. She simply walked beside him, like a ghost, like a memory, like a compass. Sometimes, when he was silent for a long time, she sang. Her voice was cold as the icy sky, but inside he felt a burning sensation. He collected names, kept them, told of those who had fallen so that no one would dare forget. And every time he spoke the name, a single point of light would light up on a distant, burnt-out star. Thus began a new song, not a legend, not a prophecy, reality. A world where memory is a weapon and oblivion is death. He knew that one day he would meet the darkness again. It would return, take shape again, and begin to whisper again. And then, at the border of all times, he will tell him, "I remember." And that's enough. The world was called Ir-Koel. According to the records, it was an agricultural moon, the third in the Iluran system without strategic significance. But Eltar knew. Songs were buried in its soil, old, forgotten, so ancient that even the stars surrounding it seemed quieter as you approached them. The ship, alive and silent, froze in orbit. Eltar emerged alone. He carried no weapons. He carried names. Kaiorn was empty, not destroyed, just empty. The streets were intact. The walls of the houses were standing. The air was clear, but nowhere, not a single voice, not a trace of life. Even the birds, even the wind, everything was silent. Eltar sensed it immediately. Oblivion had happened here. The darkness learned not to burn, not to destroy, but to erase people, bodies, and names, stories, beginning and end. And so Kaiorn stood like a doll city, cut out of memory. He walked to the center where the heart of song should be. Every world had such a place. Sometimes it was a spring, sometimes a tree, sometimes a grave. Here it was a hill covered in black ash, and beneath it a stone. On the stone, not a word, clean. And then he began to sing, quietly at first, then louder. His voice cracked the air like glass. He wasn't singing about glory. He wasn't singing about battles. He was singing about a girl named Ari, who had once buried her older brother on this hill, dead while protecting the village from an invisible storm. He was singing about her mother, kneeling, holding her last jug of water. He was singing about their dog, who they had released into the forest so it wouldn't starve to death. The words burst out of him like blood, and when he said, "Ari of the Vale clan, daughter of silence, bearer of the last fire," the sky burst into flames. Shadows appeared on the horizon. At first, just silhouettes. Then, figures, people, but without faces, without names, ashtrays of oblivion. They didn't shout. They didn't go with weapons. They just stood. They watched. And one of them stepped forward. A woman, tall. There was a hole in her chest, not a wound, a hole in existence. She looked at Eltar. "Why did you bring us back?" He felt the song cracking inside him, but not from fear, from strength. "I didn't bring you back, I remembered you." She shook her head. "We chose silence. We were in pain. We were tired. We wanted to disappear." Eltar came closer. He saw in her eyes a reflection of a world that did not exist. And he said, "Then let me remember, I won't let you disappear, even if you leave." She touched his cheek, and for the first time, she smiled. "Then sing until the end of time," and she disappeared, and with her, all the shadows. But the first sign appeared on the stone, name, Ari, and somewhere far away, in the empty sky of Kaiorn, a single child's laughter sounded. The star above the planet lit up again. Before names, before forms, before time. There was silence, not the absence of sound, but something more, a peace that did not know that it was peace. From this silence, like breathing, the first difference was born. Not light and darkness, no, pulse. It sounded once, and this sound became the birth of the song. She did not know herself, she simply was. Pure vibration running through nothingness. Where she touched the void, the first threads of light were born. They did not illuminate, did not warm, they remembered. And then, from the thickening of memory, two people emerged. They had no names, they had no bodies. They were distinguished by their response. One was like the morning, a smooth return. The second is like evening, an inevitable approach. As long as the song rang, they were in harmony. But one day she wavered. In a new place where the pulse had gone too deep, something different appeared. It did not respond to the vibrations. It absorbed them. And in that absorption, for the first time, the song fell silent. It was the birth of the first darkness. She was not evil. She was the answer, the echo of the impossible. The darkness listened. But she didn't sing. And the longer she listened, the more she knew. And one day she said, "If the song can tremble, it can be broken." From this thought, a voice was born, the one who would later be called Nameless. He did not destroy, he rewrote. He took one response, wrapped it in silence, and what was became nothing. This means that everything has become possible. But at that very moment, when the song was first touched by distortion, awareness flared in the heart of her core, and where evening and morning first united, Selen was born. Not created, not called. Reply to reply. She appeared without knowing the form, without knowing who the enemy was, who she was. She remembered before she knew, and that's why her song was pain. She sang, and the vibration became a shield. She sang, and the darkness trembled, because for the first time Merak hurt himself. He found out that he was not the first. He is a reaction. And from then on, he began to look for a way to forget, erase, even myself. And Selen walked through the eons, woven into the layers of existence. Not a goddess, not a weapon. A is the node of memory, the one that will be awakened when the song cracks again. He didn't exist. Kaiorn was not born, not conceived, not summoned. He is an error in the flow, a break in the thread where the song wavered but did not break. The place where the voice tried to rewrite the name and couldn't. In one of the branches of a young galaxy where light has not yet found its own rules, from dust, from chance, from failed oblivion, he just became, not knowing the words, not knowing yourself. There is just a feeling that someone is waiting for him. He was a nobody. They called him many things: Kaiorn, shadow, dispossessed. He wandered between worlds, changing guises, forgetting dreams, stealing voices from the dead. But all he did was search. And then, on a planet whose sky changed color depending on the pain, he saw her for the first time. Selen. He didn't know who she was. She didn't say. She stood in the sand, barefoot, with hair woven from the primordial waves, and watched the world die. "Do you want to save them?" she asked without turning around. He didn't know what to answer, because for the first time he wanted to. "What if I say I can't?" he asked. "So you won't ask how?" He took a step towards her. The world was collapsing around him. The earth cracked from the silent wave, a new form of the voice, that there was no longer a need for words to extinguish the stars. "Who are you?" he asked. She didn't answer right away, turned around, and there was something in her gaze, unbearable, the sorrow of one who remembers too much. "I'm a song that is not sung to the end." He touched her hand and everything around him disappeared. Just him and her, and memory, his, hers, common, from a future that never was, as if they had already been together, in 1,000 battles, in 1,000 endings, as if there were made for each other to be shield and blade. And at that moment, the voice felt them. He didn't understand why he was afraid, but I realized that they are dangerous. And then he started the war of names. The first attack was not a blow. She was erased in the morning, on the planet Leos, among the terraces of singing stones where children were born with a song on their lips. The sun did not rise. It just did not come. The sky did not turn black. It became empty. It's as if it was forgotten, as if it never happened. The residents didn't scream. They didn't react. They simply stopped remembering what morning was. They ate without hunger. We slept without dreams. They lived without names. In the next cycle, the rivers disappeared. After 2 continents, and then children. They were not killed. They simply erased it like a word from a dusty board. And only one girl named Leia managed to whisper, I was, and her voice stuck in the air like a cry forgotten until the end. This is how the Ash Plague began. Not a disease, not a weapon, not a curse. A distortion of memory that the darkness spread like breath. Every world, every mind, every being that forgot its name became a carrier. And then, Ash. He did not go for destruction. He went to make everything nameless. And that means rewriting. Selen and Kaiorn, already feeling each other even without words, arrived on Leos when it was too late. They walked among the survivors who no longer knew who they were. Mothers who do not remember their children. Cities that didn't know their names. Water that has forgotten how to flow. "We didn't make it," said Kaiorn. Selen stood among the ashes that had once been voices and looked up at the sky. It called, whispered. The voice was in him, in every particle. He was no longer he. He became everything. And he said, "Name yourself and I'll take it. Shut up and I'll leave you. The choice is yours." Kaiorn clenched his fists, the spark in his chest pulsing with pain. "It's a trap," he whispered. Selen looked at him. "No, it's an exam." She raised her hand, and for the first time, She sang not the song of the past, but the song of the future. Not what was, but what could be. She created names out of thin air, giving them to those who were broken. You are Neri. You are Vok. You are Aria, daughter of light. And everyone who heard it burst into flames, driving away the ash plague. Kaiorn saw this and added his own. He wasn't singing. He was remembering. He took Selin's song and made it concrete. Name, image, heart. They sang together, word and image, memory and form, and then the voice retreated for the first time. Not out of fear, out of misunderstanding. He couldn't take something that hadn't happened yet, and their song went forward. And this became the beginning of the confrontation. No war, no revenge, and the battle for the memory of the future. The light was leaving, not because the darkness had won, but because they began to forget each other. The song sung on Leos gave too much. Selin put into it more than just memory, a part of herself. The words she gave to those who had lost their names became anchors. For each such gift, she forgot something of herself. First, the little things, flowers that Kaiorn once gave, laughter, a casual glance. Then, faces, his voice, and then his name. She woke up among the stars aboard their ship, and she didn't know who he was. She didn't know who she was. Just a feeling in her chest, burning, heavy, beautiful. "Who are you?" she asked without looking at him. Kaiorn froze. His heart, his spark cracked. He knew this would happen. He knew she had given too much, but he still hoped he could hold on. He exhaled. "I'm the one who remembers you when you forget yourself." She looked at him. The eyes were the same, but they didn't have the pattern of stars he knew. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I can't stay. I feel like if I stay, I'll disappear." He nodded. He didn't stop. "Then go. I'll find you again." She left, and her name disappeared from all databases, from chronicles, from the world's memory. Even in Iskra, only a feeling remained. Then the voice found the moment. He was no longer a whisper. He created form. In the space between realities, among the shadows of what was not yet born, he wove a body from scraps of names, betrayals, and dead songs. Without a face, without a voice, but with the essence that does not forget. He called himself Ir-Koel. In the language of darkness, it means he who brings silence. And when he stood up, the stars froze. In his presence, the song trembled like a taut rope. He didn't scream. He looked, and he uttered the first phrase in his new flesh. Find her, and bring her. I want to hear her forget me for the last time." She ran through worlds not knowing why. Her name was lost, but not the song. Every step Selin took, without a name, without memory, still left a trace in the fabric of existence. The worlds where she passed began to sound quietly. The air began to remember, and the voice made flesh. Ir-Koel felt it. He didn't chase. He waited. He knew she would come back anyway, to him, because her pain now lived in him. And Kaiorn followed her. Not by tracks, not by signals, by the silence she left behind. Every world she was in sounded like a broken string, and he learned to retune this music. He didn't know if he would meet her again. He just believed. And when she finally reached the world of Elias Prime, where only one being existed, a child created from pure memory, it looked at her and said, "Your name is Selin. You are a song that is not sung to the end. You are the light that has forgotten that it was a shadow." And something inside her clicked. Not pain, not joy, just name, she remembered. And in this memory, everything exploded. The galaxies connected by the song began to sound again. Those who forgot began to whisper. Those who whispered began to sing. And when she, standing on the top of the dead city, opened her mouth, I heard a voice. "She's back," Ir-Koel said. "She's singing again." Kaiorn heard her, like a call, and he went towards him, knowing that behind him were the Ashmen, and darkness, and time, and death. And when they met, on an empty satellite where there was nothing but their memory, she said, "I remember you." And that's enough. And then he took the spark, and she took her song, and together they stepped into the center of the voice, not to win, and to remember him. Because Ir-Koel was not evil. He was silence, who also once sang but forgot. And when they named him by his real name, not as an enemy but as a brother. He started crying. The song became complete again. Light and darkness are not enemies but breath. Memory is not a burden but a foundation. And the universe began to truly sound for the first time. Kaiorn and Selen have disappeared, but their song remained. And everyone who says someone's name with love sings it. And that means they are eternal.